Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here. We are actually at Converse right now. I'm Jamie Weatherby. If you have been on our webinars in the past, you've seen me before. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement, and I have the pleasure of running this Women in Leadership mini-series. I'm joined here with Amy White. She is going to be our final addition and excellent addition to our mini-series. So Amy is a 1986 grad, and she is currently the Global Vice President of Demand and Supply with Nike. So it's a huge pleasure to have her here. It's a pleasure to be in Boston and at Converse. So I appreciate you hosting us and for joining us here today. So by way of introducing yourself and to kick us off, I would just love to hear a little bit about your journey here at Nike and what it's like to be the Global Vice President of Demand and Supply of a company of this magnitude. With this level of impact. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, thanks, Jamie. First of all, thank you so much. I really appreciate being invited. And probably good context for everybody. Converse is a wholly owned brand of Nike. So I have a nice opportunity once in a while to get back to Boston where Converse is headquartered. Nike's in Portland, Oregon. I've been at Nike for 23 years. And it's been a pretty interesting journey. As you mentioned, I lead demand and supply management for Nike, which is a function that is responsible for forecasting, planning, buying, and managing our inventory, as well as we have our marketplace analytics function for Nike, because those things are really tightly intertwined in terms of how we think about forecasting and managing. So really a wonderful opportunity. We have teams all over the world that I get to be part of, and every year, my team manages, buys, and plans almost 1.5 billion units this year that we will do worldwide. So obviously a lot of product and a really core part of the business as a wholesaler and a retailer. I've been doing the demand and supply management role for 2 years since it formed. But I did not start there. My background is actually finance and business. So I went to UNH, as you mentioned, what is now Paul College. Whittemore School at the time did not have an accounting major. So I had started as a business major, business admin, and had a concentration in accounting, and started my career in public accounting in Boston, mainly because the starting salaries were the best that was offered for business majors. And I thought, well, this is a good way to get started, is a job that actually gives you an offer before you graduate and gives you a good starting salary. So it was about as much thought about it as that. And I enjoyed public accounting. I did it for almost 5 years in Boston and loved it. And then followed my husband's job down to Florida and took a role for what was a client of ours in Orlando and worked for 4 years for a conglomerate. And learned a lot between those two jobs about companies that I liked and companies that I didn't like, positive management styles and things that weren't working in this conglomerate. We were buying and selling and managing a lot of businesses. The culture, as a result, was not quite the esprit de corps you would hope for in a company, but I learned a lot. But it was also clear that it wasn't a place that I really felt so invested in personally. And just about the same time that I was starting to think it was a good idea to make a different career move, I was cold called by a recruiter who was looking to fill a role at Nike. Wow. And with my finance background, they were looking for someone in the audit function at Nike. And long story short, kind of took that leap, came all the way across country and ended up in what I used to call Oregon. I now know is referred to as Oregon. And only New Englanders call it Oregon, evidently. But I've been there for 23 years, raised 3 sons, and have really moved my way through everything from finance to strategy. Did a role in planning and inventory management for the first time about 15 years ago. And then went into product creation and led a product organization for Nike for 3 years. And then was general manager for the running business for North America. So I had the pleasure of kind of leading our running business all the way through from the consumer and the commercial piece through marketing and product. So that was really a fun role. And then came into operations as an organization, and a few years ago had the opportunity to help form and stand up what is now demand and supply management, which is a combination of all of the planning capabilities of retail and wholesale and supply chain put together. So it's been a pretty interesting journey. I've had 9 roles in 23 years at Nike, and many of them in different functions. And that's really allowed me to grow and develop, and kind of different sides of my personality and style have been deployed in different roles, but I've always felt like I'm challenged and been able to expand my knowledge and understanding. And the job I have right now is very much having to tap into all of those things all the time.
Awesome. So I find it really interesting. So you really were interested in Nike because you got a cold call from a recruiter. That's how you got to Nike?
Yeah, I didn't put a whole lot more into it than that, but I've loved sports all my life. Been total sports fanatic. My husband and I had just barely started talking about the potential to relocate, and we're thinking, okay, if we're in Florida now, we'll go back up to New England where our family is. And when we heard about this, we thought, well, at least Oregon is on a coast and we love the ocean and wanted to be not too far from the ocean. And thought, well, we'll go do that for a couple of years. It'll be a really fun experience. And then, of course, we'll go back to the Northeast and settle. And we were in Oregon for a few years, and I just loved Nike. I mean, quickly felt the connection to the brand, the passion that we have for sport, but also human potential and innovation. And what I found at Nike was so many people that were the best at what they do, all kind of working together like a team, like a really great team where everyone is the best at their position, but the magic is what they do together. And that felt different than other places I had worked, where there was a little bit more internal competition, sometimes a little bit cutthroat. And I think maybe because so many people at Nike, team and sport is at the core of our culture, that I think people are really comfortable understanding that everybody maybe has a different role to play, but together that's what makes us strong is when we put that together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So a few years back, actually, not even, I was longer than not as long as I thought. Gosh, time flies by. Anyway, I had the pleasure of seeing you give a keynote speech at our Women in Business conference. So our Paul College puts on a Women in Business conference every year. And I think it was 2 years ago, you were our keynote speaker. And I know that in my own career, a lot of the things that you had said were really insightful, and I've carried a lot of those things with me and have thought of them. So I would love to just touch on some of the things that you had shared during that presentation. It seemed like you had 5 main mantras or philosophies that you've felt have been the cornerstone of your career success, and that you share with other women and other folks that you have cultivated their careers while at Nike. Can you walk us through a little bit of some of those and share so we can, the audience can take?
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure. Dean Deborah Merrill Sands had invited me to join the Women in Business Conference, and I have such a passion for this and have been involved in other industry organizations that help the advancement of women, as well as within my own company. And so I have had the opportunity and get asked fairly regularly for sort of what have you learned, what's worked for you, and lessons. And so I've sort of distilled, like you said, some mantras. And the first one is shoot for the moon. And one of the things that I realized early on was that I was limiting myself mentally around where I thought I could go. And it took, in my case, I was really fortunate. My dad was my biggest champion, and I felt like, hey, this is some careers that I think I'd be interested in, or jobs that I'd be interested in. And I was kind of thinking pretty small. And my dad said to me, no, he had been a president of a public company, very successful in his own right. And he said, no, Amy, you have, so much more to offer. You're innovative and smart. And I think you'd be running circles around people. You'd be frustrated in this role or that. And he's like, you should be aiming higher. You should be thinking about the boss and being the boss. And for me, that was such an eye opener, because I never thought that was even possible. And in those days, there were really very few women that were ever thinking that way. And his encouragement forced me to reset. But then I went to work, and I realized that throughout, particularly the early part of my career, people were trying to limit me as well without really asking me. And I remember distinctly times where, when I was at Deloitte, which was a wonderful training ground early in my career, and I had been a very successful staff accountant at the time, and I was promoted to a supervisor or a manager. And immediately as a woman, I was taken off of the big public companies and international companies and put on pension funds and not-for-profits. And I remember kind of thinking, wait a second, I never used to get these assignments. Those were usually for the people that weren't doing as well. And suddenly I'm promoted and this is the case. And I remember going into the partner's office, and to his credit, he was like, oh, wow, like that's just because that's the way we always did it. The women went on to those jobs, and they were willing to move me around and put me on some other things. And I realized that if you don't self-advocate and let people know that you're ambitious and you expect more, it can be really easy for someone to stereotype you. Likewise, at the second company I worked at in Florida for a few years, I was not offered a promotion, and and yet I had been, given all this really positive feedback. And when a person who was a colleague at the same level, who my boss had often complained about and said was really struggling and could I help him out, was given the promotion, I went to my boss and I said, well, what's the story? How come I wasn't offered the promotion? And the first thing he said was, well, Tom's wife is going to have a baby and he needs to be able to support her. So, he needs the promotion for the increased salary. So that was the first, like, wow.
Oh my gosh.
And then the second one was, and of course the job requires you to move to Dallas and your husband has a career. So I was sure you wouldn't want to move.
So they didn't even give you the opportunity.
They didn't even give me the chance.
Yeah.
And,
to make that choice for you and your family.
And so that's why I always say to people, don't assume somebody else's limitations until you've had a chance to ask for them and ask them. And unfortunately, many people will. And so I think if particularly if you're a woman, I'm always encourage people to make your intentions known. If you're ambitious, let people know. If you have boundaries of what you're willing to go for or not, you be the one to articulate that versus let somebody else assume.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my shoot for the moon. That's the first one.
Yeah. I know we have a few more, but we do have a question from our online audience that I'd love to grab.
Okay.
For someone who has been with the company for 20 plus years, how have you consistently made the case for yourself to grow and gain new roles along the way? And what advice do you have for others who seek to more internal growth?
I think that's a great question. Definitely one I've had a lot, and people at Nike even will say, oh, how have you moved functions? So a couple of things. One is, one of my other lessons is know your superpowers. You've got to have a really clear handle on your strengths. Because you've got to be able to advocate for yourself and give other people the words for the things that you're good at. And I think you really want to shape that opinion and not leave it up to them to make it up. And when I looked for opportunities to grow and stretch myself, I thought about the moves that I could make where I could gain more skills, right? And what I could be learning along the journey, right? So that's another one. Success is a journey, not a destination. And that's really about being thoughtful about what is the job I ultimately want to do and what are some of the skills and experiences I need to build. And I would say that being patient and not always trying to just chase the promotion has really helped me, because I've been thoughtful about lateral moves that can give me different skills and experiences. I like to think about those career moves as kind of my mental, I have a lot of visual models. One of them is to picture crossing a stream. And there's, some kind of slippery rocks in the middle. And if you want to get across safely, you've got to keep one foot on solid ground, and one foot has to hit that slippery rock. And I think when I look for a job change, I like to think about what are the things I'm going to bring to it so that I can kind of sell myself as a viable candidate. But also, I'm not going to be interested if I don't feel like there's enough challenge and enough new things that are going to give me a little bit of that thrill of, okay, I could slip and fall, but at least I know I've got one foot, and it might be my leadership or my ability to get a team to work together.
I love
my
that visual.
business acumen.
That's great. Yeah.
And so whenever I'm thinking of a job, if it feels too safe, then I know I'm not pushing myself enough.
Right.
And so that's really been a critical part of how I've thought about new roles and how I kind of go advocate for myself. To be seen in a different light.
That's fantastic. I love that visual. That's really, really great. I know you kind of touched on some of your other key points, but I want to see if you have anything else you'd like to elaborate specifically. So your second one had been success is a journey.
Yeah, I definitely, there's another analogy that Sheryl Sandberg made about, climbing the jungle gym instead of the ladder.
Yeah.
And I definitely always advise people about that, because I think if you go up straight and narrow too fast, you can really get boxed in from a career standpoint. And for me, I knew I was interested in general management, which requires some different skills. And just like my role in planning now really requires me to understand everything from manufacturing and supply chain all the way through the commercial and digital part of our businesses. So having that diverse background, I think, is always a strength.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's funny. I feel we've had we've done a couple interviews and we've done women leadership panels, and during the Women in Business, that the ladder model doesn't really seem to be actually the way it goes.
And I
just think it's so interesting that that's we've hung on to that analogy of climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak, for so long, when that doesn't seem to work like that. It's really much more of a, we've had described as a jungle gym, or you have to make those lateral moves to be able to build a strong base. It's more of a pyramid where you build that base and then you kind of keep climbing up, rather than, that little TV ladder that, like you said, it's, you get pigeonholed into what you're doing.
I think another part of that maybe people underestimate is not only the experiences that you get that are diverse, it's your network that you build. And when you've really moved around and done different jobs, if you do it the right way, you're building those relationships along the way. And I know certainly in a place like Nike, it's big and complicated. And we run a matrix organization, which I think has really become the predominant organizational structure.
What is the matrix? I was
going to say,
what does that mean?
Instead of a very hierarchical where everyone has their separate functional pipeline and leadership reports this way, we sort of, well, in our case, it's 3 or 4 dimensions to our matrix. It's a little complicated, but in general, someone has maybe both a functional leader as well as a business unit leader. So you might be in U.S. footwear planning, but you have a planning manager and you have a U.S. footwear team manager or North America geography. And so really having to work with a lot of different teams and be on 2 different leadership teams at once, where most of our people are. To effectively influence cross-functionally, it's really helpful to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, or to understand what they're trying to accomplish, so you can find that common ground. And I do think that kind of jungle gym career planning really helps you to be able to do that more effectively.
Well, it makes so much sense, because I feel like with organizations that are of the size of Nike, that ends up really siloed. I mean, and that's one of the greatest challenges, I think, of organizations trying to effectively work together of that size, is they feel like you have to get in the weeds to do the work, but then you miss out on the big picture opportunity or the big picture partnerships that actually move the whole group along.
Absolutely. I think that's so critical. And even in a big company like Nike, the relationships make it feel smaller, and it's definitely worth the investment to build and maintain those.
That's great. Yeah. And I think we have another question from online.
How do you engage in mentoring younger female employees, specifically millennials?
Oh, that's great. So I love the diversity on the teams. And in particular, one of the things that I definitely have tried to do is make sure that even on my leadership teams, we create different roles so that we can have a multi-generational leadership team, or else sometimes you can get a little insular too. We all grew up through the company at the same time and have the same kind of vision of what's needed. And in the case of Nike, our consumer is quite young, and so it's super critical to stay connected. So there's a couple of things. One is we have a lot of development programs, mentoring programs, and skip level meetings to make sure that we're having connections across the organization. I myself help to found and continue to be the executive sponsor of the Women of Global Operations Network for Nike. We have roughly 9,000 women worldwide in our global operations organization.
That's incredible. And you started that's a program
So we started that program, and the reality is that our gender balance, like most companies, is really great at the lower levels in the organization, but we continue to have some of the attrition and the fall off as we move up. And so we began this organization about 4.5 years ago, and have been super intentional about development programs, about being purposeful to create mentorship, sponsorship, and exposure for our female talent, allowing them to build networks not only with women, but with senior leaders in our company, as well as external exposure to industry organizations and development opportunities. So we're really doubling down on the investment, as well as the retention and the elevation of women in the organization. And we've seen a tremendous impact of our gender balance at every level has significantly increased, and we're continuing to see the promotions of women basically outpace the overall number of promotions. which is fantastic. And I really give credit to the team. It's a volunteer effort within the organization, and the partnership we've had with our human resources function. And we've really integrated it into the fabric of all of our D&I programs, diversity and inclusion programs, as well as the sponsorship from the senior team, including our COO. He is an unbelievable advocate and personally commits and invests time and sets that example so that my colleagues, including all of the men, are really involved and invested in the program. And you need that kind of commitment to pull it through.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. What an incredible program. Do you market that too when you are looking for new talent? Is that something that you feature and highlight? Because I feel like as a young graduate of UNH, I would have loved to have joined a company that had that kind of mentorship and cultivation of their young talent.
It's a great point. Well, we try to make sure that when someone comes in to interview, that they're also having a diverse slate of interviewers, so that they're making those connections.
Really helpful. Right.
And then when we have new hires, one of the things that I try to do is, typically if they're women, I try to get them involved in the network as soon as possible. Just ask them to attend one of the sessions that we're having. We have speaker series and things like that. We have network circles and things. And in part, just because being new at a new company and building relationships, making that seem a little bit smaller outside of your immediate work circle is such an important part of success and onboarding. And so we definitely try to make sure that the network is an extra piece that we use as outreach to connect and retain our new hires.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
We also have a whole cadre of diversity networks at Nike as well. And similarly for all of our other LGBTQ and Latino and Friends networks and African American networks and so on. We have military veteran networks. So really try to make sure that individuals have that connection. As I said, Nike's a big place, and those communities and sub-communities can be a really important part of your relationships.
Absolutely. I think we have more questions from online.
This is a two-part question. You mentioned that you had 9 roles at Nike. Has there been one that's been your favorite, and why? And then the second question is, have there been any jobs that you stepped into and felt like it wasn't the right fit and had to adjust?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I get asked once in a while about my favorite, and it's really hard. I love the current job. I know that sounds funny. And the funny thing is, many times over my career, I've thought this is my favorite job when I'm in it. And then I move to the next one. I'm like, oh no, this is my favorite job. The one I have right now, I love because the team is big and we have a big transformation we're going through. So we are a critical part of Nike's digital transformation. And my team is really one of the lead organizations that's part of that, which has been thrilling for me. And digital and analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning is something that I'm just super interested in, and have been able to kind of work with our teams on how we bring in more of those capabilities and skills. So it's been exciting. I would say if I really had to choose, though, the time I led a product engine, a footwear team, was pretty exciting as someone that's a total product geek. I loved the opportunity to work with designers and developers and the innovation team. And there is no feeling like seeing a sneaker go from, sketches and conversations to samples to one day you're walking around the airport and the people walking by you are wearing it. And you're just kind of pinching yourself like, hey, I've been a part of that.
Yeah.
And here's this person who chose it and bought it. And so that's a pretty neat feeling.
Absolutely. That's really cool.
And then the second part was, have there been any that you stepped into and felt it wasn't the right fit?
I've had a couple where I've been like, why did they want me in this job? And I should say up front that at Nike, about half the time I chose the job, and about half the time it was like, hey, we're moving you here. And so I've had a little bit of each. One was early on, and it was on a technical systems implementation, and I didn't really feel like I had the technical background, but I realized I knew more than I thought I did, and I learned pretty quickly, but it took me a minute to adjust to that and to really invest in that. And when I took on the product creation role, I would say that was one I wanted, but it was probably in that stream analogy. I probably had 2 feet on slippery rocks a lot of days because I hadn't had the level of experience, and I had to really pull myself all the way back to, okay, Amy, what am I good at? And what I noticed right away was that team had not had a leader for a while and had a lot of turnover, and they weren't working together, and they didn't have a good team dynamic. they didn't even agree on their goals, and they were fighting with other organizations on targets and priorities, and they just hadn't come together. And I thought, okay, you know what? That's actually something that I can do. I'm really good at getting people to work together. I'm good at creating forums so that we can align our vision, getting people comfortable with, frankly, the messy work of rumbling a little bit through disagreement and getting to commitment and shared agreement. And so that was probably the longest learning curve, and some of the most sleepless nights of my entire career was my onboarding into the product role. But once it clicked with me of where I could add value, the rest of the work I decided was really about, and something I learned in my auditing days, is that if you just listen to people, they'll tell you what you need to know. And so I really spent the rest of my time invested in meeting with people, sitting with developers, sitting with designers, asking them what they do, having them show me. People love to be noticed. They love to be appreciated. And in that, they're going to teach you the parts of their work that make sense and are fulfilling, and the parts that are frustrating or are just not effective. And it gave me a really good sense of where I could play. And so I do think that being a good listener is probably the most undervalued leadership skill out there.
Absolutely. So on the heels of that, I think one of the things I remember from your keynote speech too was that a lot of your roles at Nike weren't existing roles, right?
That's
a lot of them were created for you or within your skill set, or they were new when you got there. Were you the driver behind advocating for a lot of those roles? And if you were, how did you assess that business need and then advocate for yourself to be able to not only create this new role, but step into it?
Yeah, quite often, I'd say more than half the jobs I took were were brand new. I was the first one to take them, or they were a new function. And of that, there was a number of them that I really had a key hand, including my most recent role. So I'll speak to that experience. Demand and supply management was not an organization that Nike was like, hey, someone in senior leadership was like, we ought to pull all our planning teams together. But what I saw was 11 different separate organizations operating across the world on different tools, many of them Excel, and creating different plans that didn't always tie, and seeing a lot of struggle for our management teams just try to get everyone on the same page. And it was a common frustration. And as a general manager, it was a frustration that I had day in and day out in how we were going to kind of run our business. And so I had the visibility to that, as well as an opportunity, because of some industry relationships I have outside of Nike, to start to see and follow where a lot of companies were going and creating a more integrated planning function. And so I was able to start to introduce those concepts with a number of senior people. Most of all, of course, my boss, the COO, was quite open, and our culture is very innovative. So Nike is usually open to new ways of thinking and doing and solving things. And so in that case, I was able to sell it in a little bit. And originally, to be completely honest, I didn't know if it was something they were going to ask me to do, but I felt so strongly that it was the right thing for Nike. Right. I thought, well, if I knocked myself out of a job, then I'm sure there's another place the company will put me, because it's the right thing to do. So I really advocated for the role first. And then it became clear that that was kind of well on its way. And then it was, hey, if you see me in this role, I would love to do it. And here's why I think I'd be good at it. And so back to, you got to know your strengths, and you got to give people those words and advocate for yourself as clearly as possible. And then be willing to listen to the feedback, because sometimes you'll get the, hey, yeah, I agree. And sometimes it'll be like, hey, I'm not sure we see you that way. And let's talk about that. And both of those are super valuable, right? Absolutely. That's how you grow.
Absolutely. So we have more questions from online.
So the first question is, what's the next goal you have set for your career?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say my near-term horizon is really taking this function that right now is, I would say, kind of in the middle of where kind of tools are in industry, and trying to actually, or accomplishing our digital transformation, I should say, because I have high confidence. We recently did an acquisition in this space where a company called Select we acquired, which is based here in Boston, actually, which is specializes in retail demand and supply optimization analytics, which is a nice boost to our goal. So my near-term career goal is really to be a champion and leader of Nike's digital transformation and to start to build that kind of capability and acceleration well into the future. I like to say we want to leapfrog kind of where most of our industry is to build new capability and bring that into our industries. So that one is probably the one that's really most immediate on my horizon. Beyond that, I'm excited about the potential to just continue to grow and try new things. So far, I've allowed kind of my passions and interests to help me navigate, and also been open to where the company sees a need for my skills and what I bring. And so I hope to continue on that journey.
And then I have another question for you. Do you have a way to answer when people ask you about work-life balance when they would never ask a man that? I really struggle with the way to answer that question in a way that is not sassy or but want to get across.
Oh, I love that. The sentiment that is embedded in that question is one that always makes me smile, because yes, as a female leader, in my case, one with 3 kids, that is always one of the first questions people want to know is about work-life balance, and that the person asking that question is absolutely right. It doesn't seem that is frequently asked of as many men who are balancing with careers. What I do know, though, is that men today more than ever are also struggling or balancing work-life balance. For me, the notion of work-life balance, I think, is so individual and so personal. And what I've learned over my career is that it's never 50-50. It is always about adjusting and checking and rebalancing. And it has to do with, you may have something going on at home, like sick kids or challenges somewhere in your family that's taking up and occupying more of your mind space. And that's the right thing for right then. And then there are other times where it's a big deadline or something major is going on at work, and you need to ask the people that love you and count on you to be willing to live with a little less of you so that you can make that happen. And so I do think that it's a dynamic situation. I see a lot of people that try to judge other people's work-life balance, and I personally have a real aversion to that, and I don't participate in that, really, and I don't appreciate it, because who am I to sit here on the sidelines and say, boy, her nanny leaves and the babysitter shows up, and when is she ever with her kids? You know what? That is not my business, and I don't know what's happening there and what's going on, but I know that most of us are doing the best we can and make it work. And I know that my kids feel like I was a great mom and I was there for them. I will say all the time to them, thank God you didn't have my mom. My mom's amazing. She was a stay-at-home mom, but with 6 kids, and made each of us feel like we were individually special and had plenty of time with her. And that's always my bar, right? And it's really hard when, my mom was the Cub Scout leader, the room parent, the Girl Scout leader, all simultaneously. And my dad traveled a lot, and she made it all look really simple. I could not handle 6 kids and doing all that, even if I was full-time.
A lot to handle.
But what I've learned is my kids didn't have my mom. So that is not their standard. That's my issue. That's my baggage. My kids, whatever they get from me is me giving them 100% when I'm with them. I do feel super strongly about being present. I leave my phone, on the counter, on the charger when I come in, and I specifically will go and check it at maybe once or twice a night, and I stand and do that. It doesn't come in my room. It doesn't come to the table, really, and I expect the same from my family members.
Yeah.
The thing that breaks my heart the most these days is when I'm out and I see, parents with young kids, and they've got their baby in a papoose or in a stroller, and instead of talking to them, they're talking on the phone. And I'm thinking, I remember back, because I didn't have that choice to make when my kids were little. It wasn't common, and you weren't on a mobile phone all the time. And actually, that's how they learn language and bonding and interaction. And so I really hope that people learn that you gotta work to live. You don't live to work. And I think if you don't create the boundaries, then most companies will not set them for you. That's an individual choice you got to make. I think the last thing I would say about work-life balance is that it is really hard sometimes to judge for yourself when you've gone off the deep end. And I think that's why it's so important. I was very blessed with a partner. My husband would basically let me know when they were not getting their share of me. And as someone who's kind of an overachiever and has a little bit of a tendency to get a little bit deep in my work, I really appreciated that. And it was nice to have that upfront check and adjust. And I think you really need to be able to have that conversation with the people in your lives, and they need to be feel confident being able to have that conversation back with you.
Awesome. Great. I want to jump back in a little bit into some of the mantras that from your leadership skill set that you had mentioned. So I think you touched on, and we talked a little bit about know your superpowers. But what about win as a team?
Oh, yeah.
I think when you're trying to grow and you're trying to set yourself apart about being a leader and be an advocate for yourself, it's hard sometimes to also have that team perspective.
Yeah.
So how has that become one of your main leadership mantras?
I think people underestimate, I talked about my aversion to cutthroat competitive environments. And people who are out for themselves, it shows up really fast. And I think what you realize is there's no victory in business when you don't win as a team. And so if you're going to be successful, hopefully you've chosen or lucky enough to work for the right manager. One that supports you, but also gives you the feedback that you need. And if you're not getting the feedback you need, then you have to learn to be really good at asking for it. Because if you can ask for feedback, then you're able to break the ice and ask really specific questions. Not like, how am I doing? But hey, on that last presentation, I had a really complicated topic and I tried to simplify it and hit just the right note. Do you think I lost the audience or did they stay with me? Well, it's really easy to answer that kind of feedback question. When someone asks, how am I doing? Especially if you're generally a pretty high achiever, you're going to get, oh, really good.
Yeah, you're doing good.
The other parts of your team you have to think about is your mentors and sponsors. Have I got those kind of relationships? Do they know my ambitions? Do they understand my strengths? Do they know what I'm working on and trying to develop? And are they willing to speak on my behalf? Because a lot of the decisions about you and your career are made when you're not in the room. And so you need to make sure you've got that lined up. Your peer network. So one of the biggest things that has, I think, been an important part of my career is just those relationships I built along the way. And with men and women who we are truth sayers, we are sounding boards, we are an ear to the ground of like, hey, I hear this thing is happening and it may open up, you may want to get in there, or gee, I heard this said about you, let's you got to go clean this up. And so having that peer network is really, really important. And then I think finally on the personal side, the team sport there is, like I mentioned, having the right partner makes all the difference in the world. There was a study done a couple of years ago from recent women who graduated from MBA programs, and they tracked them, 5 and 10 years after finishing the program. And they were graduating like 50-50 number of men to women. But what they're finding is this huge drop off in both salary as well as job level. And what the study showed was their choice of making compromises for family and career with their partners was the #1 determination of why women's salaries and job levels were falling off. And I think that you have to be able to have a partner that is willing to support the choices that you make in your career, and you have to be able to kind of balance that out. And then finally, the other part of your team has to be your support network. Now more than ever, you can, have people help you with driving your kids to and from school practices, or cooking or cleaning, or kind of whatever task you decide you need to outsource. Because what you can't outsource is raising your family. What you can't outsource is, being present for your team at work. And I think that really understanding that you can't do all this alone is an important part, particularly for women, in thinking about how they're going to be able to manage, career and life success.
Great. And then your last one, which I'm excited to hear more about, is keep the main thing the main thing. Yeah. And I think that is such a hard thing to do. I'd love to know how you've been able to keep the main thing to get to where you are.
Well, I think it's a really good point. So like I said, having a partner and kids I adore, keep me grounded is a big part of that. I love my job, and I get super wound up and excited about it. But at the end of the day, right, I'm going to retire someday, and my life is going to be much more about my people that I love, my friends, my family. Mm-hmm. And if you don't kind of stoke those fires all along the way, you're going to look up and be a very lonely person. And you know, I do love my job, but I often said to myself when I was in a situation that wasn't working for me and that I didn't love, hey, if my alternative to being here today is to be home with my kids, hands down, I'd rather be home with my kids. And so if I can't find a job that is going to give back to me and fulfill me and challenge me, then I'm going to make a different choice. And so I think as a working mom, I always decided I better hold my job to a higher standard. Because if I'm not going to be home full time, then this better be really worth my time and me balancing that out. And so I think as a result, it's really helped me stay on top of making sure that I manage my career proactively rather than allow myself to just think of it as a paycheck. And that's been super helpful to do that, because my kids are great. I love being with them, but they would say that they like the Nike mom better than just I can be a lot if I'm full-time mom. So I think they appreciate that I get to go order a few other people around once in a while.
Fantastic. That's really cute. That's awesome. And then the last thing, the visual that really stuck with me too from your presentation that day, I would love for you to explain it because I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something about, it was a bunch of sticky notes on a mirror. That's and I remember that being your final message, and it was really powerful. Can you remind me a little bit about what that was and why that was your final message?
Absolutely. It's so appropriate now that we're here at Congress, because it was actually from the ladies' room down the hall here at Congress.
Oh, no way.
At the time. So, so the kind of the background of that was, it was about a year and a half ago. I was asked to do the keynote at the Women in Business Conference, and I came in early to work at Converse, and the day before was just kind of checking my notes and preparing, and I'd gone down to the ladies' room, and I walked in, and there's a Women of Converse network. And one of the things that they had done, and this was really, think about 18 months ago, kind of the height of the Me Too movement just getting going. And what they had done is they had started this like pay it forward, putting Post-its on the mirror in the ladies' room wall. And it said things like, you got this, you're beautiful from the inside out, way to go, keep supporting other women. And it was literally, it had started as just a couple Post-its and was like 50 Post-its.
I was going to say, I remember as a picture, it was just you couldn't even see yourself in the mirror.
Oh,
it was all Post-its.
Yeah, I took a picture of it.
Yeah.
And I thought, I got to share this at the conference tomorrow, because it literally was like this moment where you're like, women supporting women is really what it's all about. And it was such an empowering thing to have that and that messaging. And I think that's something that we just have to continue to think about, how powerful and how important that is for us, because we're not done yet. And I think there's still a lot of opportunity for women to be treated as equals, to be able to be, valued for their contributions to the business world, in addition to their other contributions to society. And I think it's going to continue to take us not assuming that it's done. Yeah. Thank you.
We have a question from online.
What is the best advice you would give to a recent graduate who has been struggling to get a job?
Network.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's so important. I think one of the things that I find too with a lot of, and my kids are this demographic, they're in their early 20s, my boys. And I think there's this inherent aversion to making contacts and leveraging networks, and somebody knows somebody, and it's like, no, I want to get this on my own. I want to do it my own way. That's just not practical. And the reality is there are so many ways, and yes, there's all these easy ways to apply online, but sometimes there's 100 or 1,000 resumes. And a contact can rarely get you the job, but they can get your application noticed. They can get you noticed, and you can then do the rest on your own and win it. But I think that it's really important to really make sure to leverage those and to put yourself out there. I think don't underestimate opportunities to volunteer for things, to be really present. Every community has business organizations and clubs that could use even things like Big Brothers and Big Sisters. A lot of business people are on the boards of those organizations and involved. And so if you don't already have networks, you can easily expand those networks, and it really goes a long way.
That's great. That's really, really great advice. So I want to ask a little bit. So you mentioned earlier, which I thought was fantastic. It sounded like your dad was one of your biggest advocates for getting you into leadership roles and not, underestimating yourself or where you could be. But I think one of the challenges for a lot of women is because the unfortunate reality is there's still more men in leadership roles than there are women. And we're working on it, and we're getting there, but it's still, there's still some room for improvement in that category. And I think it's hard sometimes as a young female to put yourself in a position of a high-powered role if you never had an example. So it sounds like your dad was your advocate, which is amazing, but did you have any female role models that kind of paved that way for you, or did you kind of get that charge just from him?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking back, and I have to laugh because early in my career, I worked for a female senior manager at Deloitte Public Accounting. And back in those days, public accounting was really working hard to diversify and have gender representation. And she was one of maybe 2 female senior managers, and eventually became a partner at Deloitte in Boston. And Ellen Gabriel, she unfortunately passed away in her early 40s from breast cancer. But I learned so much from her. She was brilliant. She commanded every room that she went in, and every client was dying to have her on their job. And she had incredible respect and support and sponsorship from, all of the male partners, not only in Boston but nationally. But what I also learned about her was she was a mom who had a husband who worked full time. And it was the first time I really saw that as a possibility. I think I, truth be told, went into public accounting in part because I had a perception that, well, you can get your CPA and then you can stay at home and maybe just work during busy season and make a little money on the side and have your own accounting practice and raise your family. And I really thought that was probably a realistic expectation because I knew I wanted to have kids and that was a top priority for me. But working with Ellen made me realize that she didn't make it look easy by any means, but she made it look doable. And I think just having a role model that shows, hey, you can kind of have some ups and downs in that, but it's okay to do that. And what I really saw was the partnership that she and her husband had, balancing their careers, and hey, who's got the pickup and who's got this, and I've got to, hey, I'm leaving early because my daughter's preschool has a thing, and seeing that it was okay to declare that wasn't popular back then. And now I always make a practice. And what I love about Nike as a part of our culture is so many people coach their kids' teams and they say, hey, I'm leaving all during football season. I'm out of here at 3:30 because I'm running practice, 4 days a week. And we make it up and we get our pound of flesh, as I like to say. But I think it really allows people to realize that that's important.
Yeah, so, I think that's really important to set the expectation from a leadership level, right?
Yeah.
If you're all your leadership team, you never leave the office, you don't prioritize your family, you don't take sick time to take care of, things like that, you set that tone that it's not okay for anyone else to do either. Exactly. So it's kind of important to be able to do that at all levels. So you're advocating for that balance and for your employees by doing it for yourself and advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
In that capacity.
I never sneak out. I like to, if I'm going out because life happens, then I am happy to let my team know, hey, I've got this going on and this is my priority right now.
Right.
And
I love that.
Role model that.
That's really important. That's great. We have another question from online.
We have 2 questions. So the first one is, can you explain the significance of your shirt as not part of the Nike campaign?
Oh yeah, thank you.
Oh.
It is actually. So what about the women? It's actually, it says just do it on it, but it was part of a recent campaign that we had about women and inclusion. And we have a saying, until we all win, right, in sport. And so we really believe in equality, and sport is one of the greatest, equalizers. But this exact kind of visual of this sign came from a woman that wanted to run in Paris in the marathon, 25 years ago, and women weren't allowed; they were barred from entry. And she had painted this on her jersey herself, and had jumped in and kind of run the race.
Amazing.
And there's a famous picture of her being basically stopped and accosted. And so that photo was in the campaign, and it became a T-shirt, and many of my friends at work, we all have it and wear it proudly. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Oh, that's a great question. That's awesome.
And then the other question is, you mentioned retirement. When you get to that point and look back on your career, what will stand out as your most memorable moment throughout your career?
Boy, that's a hard question. I know what will stand out the most is people, the people that I've been able to work with and known and been mentored by or mentored along the way. The relationships are unbelievable. So probably hands down, the people will stand out the most. I think accomplishments, that's funny. Maybe I haven't hit it yet. Lots of great moments, but I think hopefully that's still to be written.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more. So I know it sounds like you and your husband are incredible partners, and you guys have made a lot of big cross-country moves for both of your careers, not just yours here to Nike, to Oregon, but to Florida before that, which I'm sure, is a hard choice to make when you're working in a partnership like that. How have you known when it was the right choice to make a big jump like that for the benefit of one of your careers, either side of your careers?
It takes a lot of balance. So for the move to Florida was definitely so that he could get his career going. And when the opportunity came up for Oregon, my husband's career was in a really good place, but he knew that mine wasn't, and he knew I wasn't going to be happy. So he was supportive. I would say we were in Oregon for a couple of years, and his first role here in architecture, he wasn't loving. And so he was like, hey, I'm thinking maybe I'm looking around. And I remember I was so completely enamored with Nike that I remember saying to him at the time, well, you better find a really good job because I am not working after this. So if I have to move, I'm gonna let you do the heavy lifting. So he was kind of like, okay, well, maybe not. So ended up digging a little deeper and finding a great job in Oregon. But I do think it's a trade-off. And I think at some point, a lot of people I've talked to have said they've had to make a call on whose career is going to lead and whose career is going to support. And at some point, I think my husband and I, got to that place. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago from cancer. He's
sorry to hear that.
He was an amazing man, and I was really fortunate, and certainly a big part of kind of what allowed me to be successful, and has left me with 3 amazing sons that are just wonderful as well. And I hope that we gave them a great model as parents.
I'm sure you did. From everything I know about you, I'm sure you did. So what are they up to? What are your kids up to?
So one of them is actually flying into Boston today to join me for Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
here
it's Thanksgiving
in New England,
week.
So that'll be really nice. My oldest, and he is just finishing a design program in Portland, and is going to be looking for a job soon. So I speak from the heart when I talk about the networking piece. My middle son is in college at Pace in New York City and studying film there, and he's going to be driving out from New York to, we're going to be on the Cape this weekend for Thanksgiving. And my youngest is in a GAP program right now, so he's between high school and college, and he is in Australia at the moment, and we'll be back in about a week and a half, and I am really looking forward to seeing him after 3 months away. So all kind of starting to find their journey in the world. Great guys.
That's fantastic. Well, we're getting close to our 5-minute mark, so I still have a few more questions, but for the online audience, if there's anything else you want to ask, I would love for you to jump in there and take over while we have a little bit of time left. But I would just love to ask, especially, so when you give advice to your boys or when you give advice to other, young women building their career, what's your most important advice that you share to someone in their career building strategy?
It's funny. One of the things that I've come to really feel the most strongly about, that I always, if I'm sharing one piece of advice, and my kids hear this from me all the time, I always say there's no reason not to get along with people. I think that people nowadays, there is so much expectation that there's tension. And I think at the end of the day, it's just a sign that people aren't listening to each other. And so I always tell my boys and my colleagues, assume positive intent. And if you're not agreeing, it's probably because somebody's not listening and you haven't actually opened your mind to the other person's point of view. My assumption is that no person is all right or all wrong, but that if you actually start to discuss and find the common ground, that compromises are going to become obvious. And the areas of disagreement, you can then start to unpack in an unemotional way and start to look at them as pros and cons. And so one of the things that I've realized is in business, there's no room for enemies. If you don't get along with somebody, it comes back to bite you. And so I feel the same way in personal life. And so that is one of my biggest rules, is to just, if there's messiness, if there's friction, I try to clean it up, and I'll just call it right away instead of letting it fester. I'll reach out to someone and say, hey, I sense some tension in that meeting, and I know that you and I have some pretty different ideas about this. Let's get together one-on-one and talk it through a little bit more, because I have a feeling we're maybe not as far apart as it seems. Or boy, that felt like there was a really personal tone in that email. I'll pick up the phone and say, hey, I think I'm reading something in. Is there some frustration here? And it's something we need to talk about. And you'd be surprised how disarming it is to actually be open and approach it. And people really appreciate it. And so some of the people that I've had that happen with, they're now my strongest relationships, because we've already broken the ice on that. And so I would say that is probably the most important lesson.
I think that's great advice, because I hear from people all the time that they don't love conflict. I mean, I think that's human nature, right? I don't want to make an issue. I don't want conflict, but it's almost like ignoring it creates a conflict.
It totally does.
Almost, if you just confront it in a approachable, a nice way, that you could diffuse that situation really quickly, which people step back from because it feels like you're confronting that person. But
I think so.
it depends on how you do it.
Yeah.
That's great advice. We have questions for online.
So we have two. So the first one is, how would you approach initiating a work from home conversation? I ask this as a first-time mom who is struggling to manage responsibilities inside and outside the home and workplace. Not sure what your experiences have been, but would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, big advocate of work from home. And in fact, for a huge part of my career, I always worked from home on Fridays as a rule of thumb. I found myself super efficient and productive, and I was able to throw in the laundry and meet the person that has to come repair this thing or whatever that thing is, and then I'd be on calls for work or whatever. And I'd also use that as my real think time, so separate some space for myself to return the emails that I hadn't gotten to all week or work on a big project. And I try to encourage it with my teams. But I've had a lot of people ask me, gee, I'm not sure my manager's open to this. How do I bring it up? I think one of the things is, first, if you're productive and you're meeting your commitments, don't assume that you can assume that they're going to trust you and see that you're someone that's working hard. If you're getting feedback that you're not keeping up and struggling, you're probably not in a place yet that you should be asking for it. But as long as you're kind of well regarded and doing your job, I think almost every company today, and I speak to lots of people at my level, and COOs and CEOs of organizations, everybody is open to this, because they're seeing that there's not a productivity drop off, there's actually a productivity gain when people have that flexibility and they're able to get more done. And so I always encourage it, and I like people to have a plan that says, hey, if I'm really rigid and I can never come in on, let's say, a Friday, what will happen if something comes up, there's critical meetings. So just be thinking through what those complexifiers are. If you have flexibility, say, hey, more often than not, this is going to be my MO, and I'll put it on my calendar so you're aware. But otherwise, all companies now have, Blue Jeans or whatever that, call in Zoom meetings and are able to really operate. We're a global company, and if everyone has to physically be sitting in Portland, Oregon to have a meeting, then we're in trouble.
Never
right?
work together, right?
So I think that's become really common. So I would say go for it. Just go in knowing that you need to have a plan, and you need to show how you'll be flexible and how you'll check in. And the other thing is, offer it as a trial. Let's give it 3 months, and let's meet again and check back and see how it's going, and we can have another conversation.
Great advice.
Keeps it simple.
And one of my personal favorite questions is, do you have any books, podcasts, or other resources that you'd recommend that have impacted you professionally?
Great question. Oh my gosh, I love external information. I think it's one of the things I'm the most paranoid about, is being 23 years at the same company. I don't want to become stale. I want to know what's going on. Right now, I'm super obsessed with Brene Brown, her books, her YouTube videos and things like that. Totally love that. When I travel, I love This Is How I Built This on the podcast. I think I've pretty much gotten through all of them now. So I like to listen to a lot of that. And a lot of my friends and I kind of share ideas on business books, and we'll talk about some of the different ones and kind of loan them to each other and things like that, which is really helpful. So I just downloaded one on blockchain, which looks really interesting. I've just started into it. So So we'll see the Truth Machine, it's called, which is pretty interesting.
Fantastic. Well, what I'll do too is we always do a follow-up email to this, and we are recording our webinar, so we'll be able to share that after, but I'll put together a list of those to share with our audience so that you can go back and grab those in case you weren't able to write them all down.
Okay, great.
But I think we're right at time, so I want to thank Amy so much. You were amazing, and I really appreciate your time, especially Thanksgiving week. It's a crazy week for everybody, but it was a pleasure to catch you in Boston so we could meet here in person. But otherwise, we will get back in touch with you with some of those resources. And I hope everybody that's on the webinar also has a safe and fantastic Thanksgiving. And thank you for jumping on with us on the Tuesday before.
Thanks, Jamie.
So thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks to everybody who listened in and took your time out. I really appreciate it as well. So feel free to shoot me any questions you didn't get in.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.